let's get going. So like I said, the Modern UI Migration for Partners webinar. So, I mean, the title kind of gives an apt description of what we'll be going through today. So what to expect before Classic UI sunsets. That's a pretty important matter at the moment. Obviously, Classic UI is going to be sunset for 2026 R2. As of 26 R2, there won't be a Classic UI anymore. So what do we need to know before that happens? How to get ready for that? Those are pretty important subjects. So myself and Garrett will be walking through this. I'll start with the agenda for today. So quick intro, why we're here and what we'll be walking through. Then into the meat and potatoes, planning the migration, so timelines, modern UI, what it's like today, and customer-facing planning. What's under the hood, so the stack, the converter, the Acumatica converter demo, extension files, auto tests, and then we'll recap what we've looked at and let you know what it's like working with us and what we can do to help in this process. So Sprinterra, who we are and why we're doing this session. So we're actually an Acumatica ISV and development service provider. We've been in the ecosystem since 2013. We're headquartered in New York. We work with Acumatica VARs, RSVs, OEMs, and end customers on a number of issues, mostly development work. We won the 2026 Acumatica Development Excellence Award this year at Summit. We're pretty proud of that. It was our first time winning it, so that's been a long time coming, but it goes a long way to show the kind of work that we do and how clients appreciate us. So why this session? So obviously 26 R1 is the last release where Classic UI is going to be a fallback where we can use sort of workarounds that are built into Classic UI for that modern UI migration. So we've already delivered a lot of modern UI migrations on 26 R1, and we want to share what we've learned so that partners can plan these customer migrations without any surprises. So that's why we're here. So planning and migration, I'll hand it over to Garrett, who's going to be going through the rest of the presentation. We'll go over here the timelines, modern UI today, and customer-facing planning. So Garrett, take it away.
Perfect. Thank you, Sam. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. So we want to start by talking a little bit about, as Sam mentioned, timelines. So we'll start there and take a look at where modern UI is at today and the ability to switch back and forth and when that goes away. So let's go ahead and jump to the next slide. All right, so we are in that countdown phase right now where 26R1 is out. 26R1 is the release where modern UI became generally available, but classic UI is still available in 26R1 as a fallback if needed. Going forward to 26R2 and beyond, that's where we're going to stop seeing classic UI, and we're going to be kind of full steam ahead with modern UI. So 26R2 is going to be coming out end of Q3, beginning of Q4, somewhere in that window. So as we start to look ahead to migrating any customers to those 26R2 and beyond versions, what that modern UI transition looks like is going to be very important for us to prepare for, because it is something where it's not a normal upgrade, specifically when they have customizations, whether those are completely custom screens or whether it's customizations to existing Acumatica screens. That's where the transition to modern UI takes a different shape than your standard upgrade. All right, so I wanted to just briefly talk about what modern UI looks like in practice today. But the navigation has been rebuilt. So the way you navigate screens, the breadcrumbs that are there, the way action buttons are available, search behavior, things like that, how your favorites are structured, all of those things are going to be slightly different. One big piece is personalization has moved to, it's kind of on a per user basis. So users can personalize their own screens the way that they want to. So if they want to move fields around, if they want to hide columns, if they want to tweak the layout, move tabs, any of those types of things, users can have a very custom experience as far as how they're interacting with the system. You've got dashboards and pivot tables that are converging into one. So this is something that's going to be different in modern UI. And in some cases, we've seen a little bit of uneven performance. This is something that they're currently working through, but in general, modern UI is going to be noticeably quicker than classic UI, but there are certain screens or GIs or heavy reports that are a little slower than classic, not a long-term thing, but just something to be aware of. These items we mentioned just to kind of highlight that in transitioning client to a version that's going to be built on modern UI, it is important to get them exposed in that sandbox testing phase, to get them into the system, to get a feel for what that look and feel is going to be like going forward. Okay, and this is just a little more detail on what you'll see in modern UI today. So as you can see, the layout is a little bit different. In the screenshot to the left, this is an example of how a user can change the configuration of how their header screen is laid out, or really the full screen, how it's laid out. So moving sections around, moving fields around, all those types of things. But this is, again, just an idea of look and feel. You can see the action bar is a little bit different. The way that you navigate is a little bit different. The spacing of fields, all those types of things where it is built a little more optimally than classic UI, but it takes a little bit of an adjustment to get used to where buttons are, how things are laid out, and that sort of thing. One other thing to note, as we mentioned, in general, your search is going to be quicker. You navigating the user interface is going to be a little quicker just because it's built a little more intuitively. But again, the biggest piece here is just that it is a transition, right? So even from the UI perspective, from the user side of things, navigation is going to be a little different, and getting familiar with the screen is going to take just a little bit of time. It's not a huge thing, but something that needs to be accounted for. Okay, one other deadline that is not necessarily Acumatica related, but Chrome is going to stop loading classic UI as of November 17th. This is where Chrome is removing XSLT support. And essentially what this means is that classic UI in Chrome will no longer load if things continue as planned for that November 17 date. So this is something where even if your upgrade was not planned until after, so you weren't planning to go to modern UI until, let's say, December or January or something along those lines, you may run into issues on Chrome. So it's kind of another driver of getting us to modern UI. So something else to keep in mind as far as milestones and as you're looking ahead is going to be that change in Chrome where it will no longer work well with classic UI. All right, and here we wanted to talk about the level of effort required to migrate to modern UI for different scenarios. And we are going to have a more in-depth demo coming up where we get a little more into the technical weeds of what it may look like to update a customization from classic to modern UI. But a general idea is if it's an out-of-the-box screen that has no customizations, there's really no additional effort. That's going to convert from classic UI to modern UI with no additional effort. This is all managed via Acumatica. They built it in classic. They've also got the modern UI built. So really, the modern UI version built, I should say. So really, there's no effort required if it's out of the box and if there's no customization to it. The next scenario would be something with light customization. So let's say it's an out of the box screen, but we've added some custom fields or we've added a custom tab or something like that. And this is where the level of effort starts to uptick. It's nothing incredibly substantial, but it is still a higher level of effort than your normal upgrade to convert that customization and those custom screens from classic UI to modern. And in this scenario, you would run the Acumatica converter tool, and there would likely be some manual effort required in order to finalize it. So the converter tool takes a big portion of that conversion, but it doesn't necessarily take it from start to finish. And we'll show in the demo here in just a moment what that actually looks like. But there, you would typically expect some amount of dev hours required in order to convert those types of screens. Sorry, let's jump back to the slide. Just a couple more things to hit on there. The last two buckets are going to be more heavily customized standard screens where there's action buttons, there's different things like that. And this is kind of in that medium to high range. So maybe a little higher level of effort from the dev side, but still not incredibly substantial. But this is where, again, the converter isn't going to take you all of the way that you need to go. There's going to be manual work in TypeScript, in HTML to make sure that those files are updated and correct. And then the final one is going to be something that's heavily customized. So either a screen that was built completely from scratch, or maybe a complicated ISV package. Those require high levels of effort in order to convert. And this is where you'd want to have a full assessment of the customization. And you'd want to be able to really get into the weeds of understanding what's going to be required. And these you typically want to handle as a true project where you're creating a kind of a plan of attack and that sort of thing, because there is going to be a fairly substantial level of effort there. Okay. All right, and we've kind of broken down the different types of screens that you may the different categories of screens. So there are going to be the standard screens with no customization. These you're essentially leaving as is. They'll convert automatically. There are going to be the screens that you can convert with the tool, which is going to typically it would be fully custom screens. But again, it may only take you part of the way there. You can run the converter to handle the bulk of the process, but then you're going to need to clean up the output, test it, and depending upon the overall complexity of that screen, that's going to determine the overall number of hours to convert. There's going to be screens that you need to completely rebuild from scratch. So if it's an incredibly heavily modified screen or a custom screen that is no longer working, or the level of effort to convert it is substantially beyond the level of effort just to rebuild it in the modern UI, in some cases you may have screens where you would need to completely rebuild as opposed to attempt to convert. And then finally, as with any upgrade, there may be customizations or screens that you want to retire. So if there's something that's no longer used or it's become redundant due to new functionality that's available out of the box, there are going to be screens or customizations that you may need to retire as well. All right, and a couple of things that we wanted to highlight to share with your customers now is that, one, the deadline is real. So this is a real kind of line in the sand that has been drawn to where going beyond that 26R2 release, Classic UI is going to be retired, and Modern UI is going to be the only UI that is in effect. So planning ahead of this, as opposed to being surprised by it, is very important. The next one is that their day-to-day users, there is going to be a visual change. There will be slight changes in the way things are laid out. So getting hands-on with it in the sandbox is important, because it's not something where it's going to look and feel the exact same on Monday after the upgrade, the same way it did the week before. And then the last one is your customizations really do need a migration project, because each of the customizations are going to require some level of effort in order to convert from Classic UI to Modern UI. So properly planning for that and putting together a full project plan of how we're going to approach it, and the expected level of effort, all of that is going to be very important. All right, and now we want to get a little more under the hood. So this section is going to be a little more technical. We are going to include a demo here that goes through converting two different customization projects from Classic to Modern. But let's go ahead and jump into the next slide. So first, just understanding the tech stack that we're working with and what's going into and coming out of the converter tool. So a couple of things. On the Classic UI side, you've got an ASPX markup, you've got C# code under the hood, you've got web forms model, and you've got server-side rendering. Where on the Modern UI, you've got an HTML markup rather than ASPX. You're going to have TypeScript, view models, you've got Aurelia.io framework, and you've got client-side rendering. And what we're putting into the Acumatica conversion tool is going to be an ASPX file. There's going to be custom DAC and graph. There's going to be field controls, event handlers, that type of thing. And then the output that we're getting is a TypeScript file, an HTML file. You've still got your custom DACs and graphs. And then you're going to have the generated TypeScript view model and your generated HTML layout. So structurally, things are changing a bit from classic to modern, and that's really what necessitates a lot of the manual effort to convert. All right, and so now we're going to jump into the live demo. This demo was pre-recorded. A reason that we did that is to save a lot of the processing time. So some of the clicks of the buttons that we do will require 20, 30 seconds for the system to think over the course of the demonstration. That adds up to a pretty significant amount of time. So we've pre-recorded the demo. I'll kind of talk through what's happening with that demo once we get to it. And essentially what you're going to see is you're going to see a real modern UI conversion fully recorded. And this is going to give you an idea of some of the things that you may deal with. We chose a fairly straightforward example just to kind of fit into the constraints of this demo. But we're going to look at two situations. So there's going to be one where it's a standard Acumatica screen. We're going to use the stock item screen that has been customized. And then the second is going to be a screen that we've built completely custom, so completely from scratch. And this is going to be a warranty related screen. And we're going to go through the conversion of both of them. All right. And this is, two pretty straightforward examples to provide broader context to what you can expect. So in a standard client environment, there's going to be potentially multiple customizations, multiple screens impacted. So what you're seeing here, you can kind of extrapolate out to what you may expect to see in your client environment. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get the demo started, and we'll share what that looks like. And again, this is going to be fairly technical. So this may be something that you want to share with your technical team going forward. And again, any questions at the end, we'll be happy to answer. All right, so where we're starting here is on the stock item screen, we've built a pretty simple customization. So if we open the screen up, we're going to see 4 custom fields in the top right: warranty plan, coverage type, coverage months, and a checkbox there. Those are just 4 pretty standard custom fields that we've added to the stock item screen. And then on this second screen, this is a fully custom screen that we've built called the warranty registrations. So we're going to go through the conversion of both of those to the modern UI. So step 1 is that convert to modern UI action there, which that's the automated portion. That's going to generate new files in the customization package. So now that that process has run, we can go into the customization package and we can take a look. You can see there the modern UI files with 4 different ones. That's what was just generated. And at this point, there's no indication that anything has gone less than perfect. So we're going to run the publish, and we're going to run into a big validation error. So it's important to point out that this validation error that we're about to see, it was not highlighted by the converter tool. The converter tool didn't notice this, but in attempting to publish this package, we're starting to understand that something may have gone awry. And what we're going to see here is the developer that's working on this kind of tracing back to get to the actual problem that's at hand. All right. And one thing that's important to notice is these errors will manifest themselves in different ways. So you've got to be pretty careful with how you do this. So as you can see, we're switching to the modern UI just to get a look at what it looks like, and also to get a feel for look and feel. So you'll notice here in the modern UI, now that we've switched, those 4 custom fields related to warranty are gone. And what the developer is identifying now is that the tool generated a label internally that didn't actually match what the system was expecting. And in the grand scheme of things, you can see he's highlighted there the form-stock item, which is the root of our issue here. And it, when all said and done, this is a very small mismatch, but it's something that's very important. And it was invisible in the sense that the converter tool didn't highlight that it was an issue that had happened until we ran the validation. And this is the kind of thing that it's small, but it stopped the screen and the customization from showing the way that it should. So now once we actually dive into the customization package and into the corresponding files here, this is where we start to see where we need to update this. So again, very simple change. We updated from a div 0 to a form stock item to actually provide the correct linkage there. Very small change that needed to be made, but that's the type of thing that you may see from time to time, and in many cases, a little more frequently when converting from classic UI to modern and using the converter tool. So now that we've made that change, we're going to publish the updated package. And now we're going to notice it validates successfully and we get no errors kicked back to us. So we're going to get a customization published successfully. That's great. And we're going to go take a look at our stock item screen to confirm that the fields are now showing there in the modern UI. So when we click into the field here, or sorry, into the screen, we're going to see top right, now we've got our fields again. Everything looks great there. So on this standard screen stock items, we've completed the transition to modern UI. But now we're going to take a look at the warranty registration screen, which this is our fully custom screen. And we're going to realize that we've got some issues here as well. So when we pull this up, what we're going to see is under that claims area, our grid is no longer showing correctly. Once we switch it over, you notice the grid is no longer showing. It looks like we might have an action issue up top, which we'll dig into in just a second, but we recognize that the grid is no longer showing. So important thing to note here is that these conversion errors can happen many different ways. You'll notice on this one, when we published the customization, it validated successfully with no errors kicked back. However, the screen is still not showing correctly. So this is something, again, we have to be very, very careful about, and we have to manually confirm the output of the converter. And we, in many cases, have to perform manual analysis and manual updates in order to correct it. So from here, we're in that manual work portion where the developer, in this case, is rebuilding certain portions of this code that didn't convert correctly and may need to go back and forth to the original screen to confirm exactly how it was pulling data in, just to make sure that the rebuilt version connects to the correct information on the back end. So we've got this fast forwarded just to go through a lot of this very, very quickly. But these are all the components that in this case didn't convert correctly and needed to be rebuilt in order to tie all of the data together the way that it needs to. And the level of effort here, you can obviously see in this scenario, there's a much higher level of effort than on the original fix that we made. The original fix was on a standard screen with just a couple of custom fields. The fix that's being performed right now, this is on the fully custom screen. So it means every component of that screen was built from scratch. So when the converter tool is converting those types of screens, it's worth noting that there's a lot more for the converter tool to check, a lot more room for error. You also notice we just had an error message in the top right, and that was kind of a bug in the converter tool itself that we had to work through and manually rebuild certain components of it. And so now we're going through and we're updating each of the modern UI files that is related here. And we're getting close to having this ready to go. Once we finalize this portion of it, we're going to publish this customization, and then we're going to go take a look at our warranty registration screen to confirm that the grid is showing correctly. And one of the last fixes here, if you were looking closely there was a missing button that was identified that it lived on the server side and not on the screen itself. And again, this is something that the converter tool doesn't think to check. And really, most people would not think to check it. These are very small details that we're talking about, but this type of detail is what's going to be very, very important to having clean conversions from the classic UI to the modern UI. So with all of those changes made, we're now going to publish this customization. We're going to get a successful validation, and we're going to see no errors are thrown back at us. But at this point, we're kind of learning that if we don't get any errors thrown back at us, that doesn't necessarily mean everything is perfect. So we're still going to need to go into the screen and do a manual confirmation to see whether or not the conversion is complete. One of the big things is going to be on that warranty registration screen. Are we now seeing a grid down there? And we do see that now there's a grid showing as opposed to the general text box that we saw. And we've also got the register warranty action. That's the field that we needed to update due to it living on the server side and not actually on the screen itself. Okay, and that's the very last piece of the puzzle here. And while we're finishing up that, just because I know most of us are probably not as interested in the code as we are the overall concept, but what we looked at here was two different screens. One was a out of the box screen, which had small customizations on it, and one was a fully custom screen. Both of those scenarios required manual developer work in order to convert correctly, but the scale of that work was different. So in many cases, if it's an out-of-the-box screen with small customizations on it, the level of effort may be a little smaller just because most of it is out of the box. Most of it was Acumatica built, so most of it's going to convert over cleanly. It's only the custom components that the converter tool needs to convert. When it's a fully custom screen, everything is custom, so it needs to convert all of that, so there's just significantly greater room for error. So now we can see that the register warranty button is showing correctly, and everything looked good to go there. Now, so that's the end of the demo, and kind of the concept that we want to take away from that is what you just saw was obviously sped up for most of it, and we skipped over a couple of things, but that analysis and that review is going to need to be done for every screen in Acumatica that has been customized to convert it from classic to modern UI. So having visibility into that and having awareness into what goes into converting to modern UI is very important. That way you can set expectations for your customers and also game plan internally. How are you going to deal with that? How are you going to allocate your dev team? Will you need to bring in outside resources? All of those types of things, because in the video, the problems were very quickly identified because we obviously the plan for this was to kind of show start to finish how it would work. But there's a lot of expertise that goes into identifying those errors, a lot of expertise that goes into understanding how to correct those errors, where to find them, all those types of things. So it's definitely a project that requires dedicated effort in order to perform successfully. So with that, let's go ahead and jump to that next slide. And we're going to transition into what we learned. So looking at the demo, looking at some of the technical components that we talked about, what have we learned? And this is going to go into providing a realistic scope into what's required to convert from classic to modern, and also what are some of the mistakes that we can expect to see and we can be prepared for in order to make it go as smoothly as possible. All right, so we touched on a couple of the potential errors there, and you saw that sometimes errors aren't always obvious, and they're not always even referenced. So the converter tool doesn't always throw an error. When we're publishing the customization, we don't always get a validation error. But some of the things that you can see would be grid columns that are reordered. So maybe they're in a different order than they originally were. So it's going to look similar to what you've seen, but it's not necessarily the same. You may see fields that get thrown into non-existent sections. So as a result, the fields don't exist because they're present, but in a section that doesn't exist. So little things like that. You might see elements that have been skipped. So buttons or fields, or in some cases, entire sections that don't make it into the final output. And you may see complex screens that are throwing errors. Something's going on to where like the underlying mechanics are not working correctly and things like that. So these are some of the other areas that you can look for as well. The important thing to note is the converter tool is great. It does a lot of the manual work for us, but it doesn't do all of it. There's in almost every situation in which you need to convert a screen from classic to modern, where there's some level of customization. In most cases, there's going to be a manual review required, and in many cases, it's also going to require manual effort in order to correct certain components. All right, and then on the auto test side of things, so we wanted to mention if you do have a sophisticated dev team that has built out auto tests to be used for upgrades, it's worth noting that you need to plan time for these components. There may be UI wrappers that don't survive. So there's a different element structure in modern UI versus classic, and sometimes they don't make it across. There's going to be full wrapper regeneration required. So this is going to be something that you wouldn't typically plan for in a standard upgrade from classic to classic, but in an upgrade in the future where you're going from classic to modern, that's something you're going to need to keep in mind. And again, we just want to reiterate, it's important to plan this as a separate work stream. So the auto test migration is its own project in its own right. So it's something that should be scoped, priced. You should understand there's going to be, hours and time dedicated to it. So if you're running CI pipelines on Acumatica, you need to have this conversation before the upgrade kicks off to understand how everything is going to tick and tie and work together. Okay, and we wanted to give some ballpark time estimates as well. So obviously there's a lot of nuance here and a lot of variables that could affect this, but if you're converting a custom screen via the converter, that's fairly straightforward. Then it could be a few hours per screen. So you're going to need to review the generated code. There will need to be some level of cleanup. And again, driven by the complexity of the original screen. So it's typically just a few hours, could be more depending upon the complexity. If you've got a standard screen, so when I say standard, I'm referring to out of the box, that's modified. This could be anywhere from a couple hours to a day per screen, again, depending upon the complexity, but that's kind of the ballpark that you're looking at. And then for heavily customized screens, which in some cases, these are even worth rebuilding as opposed to migrating, depending upon the complexity. They could be a day or more per screen to convert. And then the final one is this is more on the ISV side, but if a full ISV package needs to be recertified, this is a much larger project, and it could potentially be weeks of work depending upon the complexity of the customization, or sorry, complexity of the ISV package and the solution and how many screens it's touching. All right, and then the final piece from my side is just the three things to mention to your customers now and kind of warn them against is, and really your dev teams as well, but one is treating the converter as a finishing tool. So the converter tool is a wonderful tool, but it's a piece of the puzzle. It's not the entire puzzle. So understanding that once you use the converter tool, there are subsequent steps that need to be taken. That is going to be very important. Don't forget about auto tests. So auto tests can be a very important part of the overall upgrade scope. So this is something to factor in as you're planning those upcoming migrations. And also, we don't want to default customers into the modern UI at 26R2 without any, forewarning, right? So in the sandbox testing, we want to allow customers to get visibility in there, get their hands dirty, start to play around with it, understand the screen's going to look a little different. You may click on a button in a different place. There may be a different layout of the screen, understanding that they have some flexibility in how the screen is laid out, where to take advantage of that and maybe where not to, those types of things. Make sure we're preparing for customizations. And again, the important thing is moving to modern UI is not a flip of a switch. There is going to be some effort that is attached to actually making that transition. So making sure our VARs are aware, making sure our customers are aware, and from the ISV side as well, just understanding that there's a process that needs to be taken to get from classic UI to modern UI. And we are more than happy to share some of the things that we've learned. We've, at this point, made a significant amount of conversions, and we've run into some of the roadblocks that you may run into as well. So happy to share more about that. But With that, that's going to wrap up my portion of it. I'm going to pass it over to you, Stam, to finish out.
Thanks, Garrett. So yeah, that's pretty much it in terms of the run through of what we wanted to address today. However, I did want to run through quickly sort of what we can help with this process. So at Sprinterra, what we do is help partners with this kind of technical work. Obviously, that's what we're recognized for. So modern UI migration assessments is something that we can do with tenant triage of your actual customer customizations, plan the size and pricing. We usually can get that back to you within 1 to 2 weeks at most. We can do white label development as well. So the customer doesn't need to know that it's us doing that work in the background. You can send us the information, we'll work on it, and all the customer sees is that you have given them a great result. We can help migrating your customers' customizations to modern UI. So as you saw, it can be more complex than what we originally think it might be. So we can help with that as well. And also auto test migration, everything to do with that, regression suites, rebuilding for customers, testing the SDK wrapper, we can help with as well. So if you do need any help with this or you have any questions, you can reach out to us at any time, obviously, and we'd be more than happy to help you or point you in the right direction. That brings us to Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free. You can turn, I don't know if we have Mike's availability turned on, but you can either turn on your mic if that's possible, or just send us a question here in the chat. So we'll keep it open for a few minutes. If anyone
there are a couple
has...
of questions in the chat.
Yeah, sure. Let's address them. So I can hear, I'll go back. So Anahi, you were asking, when you need to migrate customization packages, do you rate according to this effort table or just a percentage of the original project?
So Alex, you may be able to answer this better, but it's not going to be a percentage of the original project. It's going to be based on an assessment of the overall effort required to convert those screens. The tables that we shared during the presentation are kind of a ballpark, but there are a fair amount of variables that go into it. So we do have an assessment tool that we use in order to get a better understanding of each of the customizations that you may have and the screens that they're impacting and the complexity of each. And coming out of that assessment, which it's an automated tool where we kind of assess the customizations. Coming out of that, we'd have a better idea of the level of effort, but it's going to be kind of on a per project basis with an understanding of the complexity of the screens that we're accounting for and the number of them.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. So we do have a grading table for the effort of customizations. It's not exactly the one that you saw in the presentation. It is slightly different, but there is a grading system for the difficulty of effort. So we can send that to you if you'd like as well. Next one, Anahi as well. What are the steps to, I love that you're asking questions, by the way, Anahi. What are the steps to build and test our customization screens in VS Code? Sometimes the npm run build dev does not reflect the changes in the screen until republishing everything. That's above my head.
Yeah, that's probably where I chime in. So when we are working with making any changes to modern UI, we do work in VS Code and we do use npm run build dev. So probably the difference is that we are mostly using it with customization folder. So if you check official documentation from Acumatica, you can use different parameters to specify what exactly you want to build, and this, in my experience, greatly improves how the building of modern UI works. So far, once I figured out, like in the first week of working with modern UI, after that it's working 100% of the time. I'll probably paste some of comments in the chat. They should help you. Otherwise, you can reach out to our team. Alex, I believe we can do something like that if needed.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Andre. Any other questions? Feel free to post in the chat. So Andre's posted a few things for you there, Anahi, in the chat. Any other questions? I'll channel my inner auctioneer and go going once, going twice, sold. Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining. If you do have questions that come up in the future, feel free to send us a line. So you can send me an email, samuel.robitaille@sprinterra.com, or just go on the website and contact us. Any questions at all, feel free at any time. And I hope that you got something out of the presentation today. Obviously, we'll be sending out the copy of the recording. So if you missed something, you can go reference it in that. Again, if you have any questions at any time, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to help.